Well, hey, everybody, thanks for joining us again. And it's so refreshing to start to enter a time where we're not just putting content about how you pivot from COVID or how you change the way you're doing things with the CARES Act, but we're actually moving to business topics. Ironically, our business topic that I've been just so excited to get to share is today with Darrell Rigby. We're talking about a brand new book that he wrote. Darrell, why don't you just introduce yourself uh, and tell us a little bit of your background, and then we'll talk about this book that you started writing probably years ago, and releases right now. So tell us a little bit about your story.
Terrific. Thank you. First of all, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be part of your program. I appreciate the invitation. I have been with Bain for 42 years, and I head Bain's Agile practice and our innovation practice globally. I love innovation. I am passionate about the ability to help businesses grow. The most important thing to know about me is I am a father and grandfather. I have 3 grown children, 8 grandchildren who mean the world to me. And I believe that Agile is a better way of doing business and it's a better way of living life. So it's important to me.
Well, we've been talking about this. Folks who know our business know that of our 9 cultural values, the one that we really kind of hire around is ever increasing agility. And how funny, I mean, the book takes a solid year to produce, and it's probably years of research before, but the book that we're going to talk about today is Doing Agile Right. You can see it back there in the corner of Darrell's bookshelf as well. But man, I never thought I would. There are 2 words that I'm so tired of hearing right now: unprecedented and pivot. It's like, can we find some synonyms? And I think agility is one of them. I mean, people who watch or listen to us are fairly aware that 2 of the biggest sectors of our work are schools and Christian churches. And neither of them have been able to meet. And they've had to, whether they're the brand newest, high-tech church that there is, or my mother's little church in the western woods of North Carolina, they're all having to figure out how to do online. So this is almost like I don't want to go too far into your life, Darrell, but almost a God thing that the book came out right when it did. What made you start thinking about this book? Everything I've ever written, there's been a burden in me to get a message out.
And that's true for me as well. I never intended to write a book, actually. I've written several articles on Agile. It just turned out there was so much to say about the topic that I couldn't do them justice in 4,000 word articles. And so we decided to write the book. Fortunately, I have 2 co-authors, Sarah Elk and Steve Berez. And the best part of this has been being able to work as a team with them in an agile fashion. And so it's been challenging, but I've been grateful to have them as partners. And in the end, I feel very good about the product.
That's great. I have the privilege of having a sister-in-law who is a partner at Bain, so I know a little bit about it. But those who don't know, I'll say it my way, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but it is arguably the finest management consulting on the planet. And it's just, it's not the cookie cutter thing at all. From what I can see, it's more of we're going to come alongside some really thoughtful companies and try and help them fine tune. Is that a fair way of saying that?
You're very gracious, thank you. And I couldn't be here for 42 years if I didn't love it as much as I do. A couple of things that I really love about Bain. Number one, we do get rated the #1 consulting firm to work at fairly consistently, and often #1 company in the country to work at. So it's a great place to work. It's a very team-oriented culture. And one of the things that I've appreciated most about Bain is that they allow me to pursue my personal passions. So I feel like I've had 5 different careers all at the same company,
Wow.
because when I get interested in retail, they let me pursue retail. When I get interested in turnarounds, they'll let me take a look at that. When I get interested in innovation, they're happy to support me there. So just a very supportive culture and one that encourages people to do what they love doing, knowing that they'll be best at that kind of thing.
That's great. Part of the reason I wanted to tee that up was to point out that you guys work with some of the largest and most established companies in the world. Now, what does this have to do with agility? The reason we have agility is one of our values. I founded our company, so I can help name the values. It traces back to a time, Darrell, when I was, I don't know, let's say 6, 7 years ago. I'm in my early 40s. And I jog. Running would be a little bit bullish to say. Jogging is a better word for what I do. But I'd gotten to the age where I had to start stretching some because I'd get injured. And I remember trying to touch my toes when I committed to start stretching, and I couldn't do it. And frankly, the stretching after the 6-mile run was harder than the 6-mile run. And my at the time 2 or 3-year-old, our youngest, came in the room and saw me struggling to touch my toes. And she just looked at me up and down, and she sat down next to me and tied herself into this human pretzel that only a 2 or 3-year-old could do. And then she stood up and looked at me again and just laughed and left the room. And I thought, oh my goodness, every day I'm alive, I get less flexible. Like, that's a biological fact. And I think it's probably true of the organizations we work with as well. And so when jumping back to, you're working with Bain, you're working with these great companies, a lot of them have been around a long time. And would you say that agility naturally atrophies? And I want to dive into this as a subject because people are saying agility is such a great thing, but let's talk about why it's not present in most companies most of the time.
I think the challenge is that when you become a successful company, the natural inclination is to try to make the things that got you to success repeatable. And so you create a bureaucracy, and I don't use that term in a negative sense because I think of bureaucracy as one of the greatest innovations in the history of business. Bureaucracy is what allowed mom and pop shops to become global enterprises. And the characteristics of a bureaucracy, layers of approval, division of labor, standard operating procedures, those are really very important concepts for continuing to do things that made you successful repeatedly. The challenge is if you get so mired in that bureaucracy, you stick to what made you successful in the past. But if the environment changes, you're still stuck with what made you successful in the past rather than what you have to do to succeed in the future. So I think of it a little bit like evolution in that you want to maintain the features that are working well, but you have to change the things that no longer work well if the environment has changed. So what we say about Agile, a lot of people think of Agile as the antithesis of hierarchy or of preserving the status quo. And we don't really. We think of Agile as lying at the golden mean between having a static company and a chaotic company, because too much change can be just as bad as too little change. So what we're trying to do is to find this perfect balance between running the business reliably and efficiently, changing the business rapidly and effectively, and then harmonizing those two activities so that they work well together. You keep what works well, but you change what needs to change. That's the trick, really. If you get too far on one extreme, you're going to be mired in stasis. If you get too far on the other extreme, you're going to be in a chaotic situation and it'll spin out of control. It's that golden mean that we're searching for.
Well, let's talk about, so the folks who listen to this, there's a pretty predictable bifurcation in the audience. You get some people who are if they're in a church, for instance, they might be in a church that's been around forever. The church I pastored here in Houston, Sam Houston went to. So like, that's a while. Uh, then you've got other people who are highly entrepreneurial, and they've planted their church or started their church. So they're in startup mode. And I've actually done both. Have pastored this old church Sam Houston went to, and then started this church. And they both have like it's different things. So I want to talk to each of those people right now. Like, let's talk to the established or bordering on static, like the 7 last words of the church. I don't know if you've ever heard this, but it's, we've never done it that way before. so like
Yes.
you build systems to protect, but then you get too static. So as you've studied approaching this golden mean, what are some tangible steps that you would offer to a business or a school or a church that might be stuck in their systems and have become prisoner to them, rather than the systems being a servant to the organization?
It's a great question. And what we find with larger, more established, successful organizations is that you have to find a way to increase variability. You have to find a way to experiment. And the key is, how do we do experiments in a controlled way so that if they don't work, that's fine. We tried it. We can stop it quickly. If we try something differently and it works brilliantly, then how do we scale it? How do we figure out how to do it more frequently or in bigger, bolder ways? And so we're constantly searching for new ideas. And we're searching for those ideas from maybe members of our congregation, people that just have a thought on, I've been doing this for 10 years. A couple of months ago, I tried this, it worked. How do we share the idea with others? How do we try it? Sometimes we may get ideas from other church organizations, from other businesses, from other government organizations. I saw this happening here. I wonder if we could try something similarly. So we have to establish ways to collect ideas and test those ideas in fairly risk-free ways. The ones that don't work, we'll cut off quickly. The ones that work, we'll find ways to expand. And then we'll adopt those as new standard operating procedures and start looking for the next best way to find things to improve.
That's
And it
great.
can be a fun process.
That's good. And I would think that will apply to hiring too. I want to get to that before the end of things. But let's talk to my friends who have just started a church or a school or a business or an organization. And like, it's that phase where every job description just says other duties as necessary. And I won't name names, but I have more than a few founder clients who are a little bit ADD, and they move around, bounce around, and they embrace the chaos, and it's almost too much. So what would be some tangible steps for people that are in that startup mode that need to not confuse agility with chaos?
Another great question, because we see that all the time in all kinds of organizations, including businesses, that a lot of businesses start off a little chaotic. And over time, you have to adopt more professional approaches, more repeatable approaches. And there are a few things that are very hard about that. One is, as the organization gets a little bit larger, you have to trust other people. You can't do everything yourself. And so you have to bring on talent to do things so that you can focus on other things. And I think the hardest thing to realize is, when I'm bringing other people onto the organization, if I'm going to build an effective team, I'm going to have to bring on people that are different than I am.
Oh,
That a team brings complementary skills. You know, we all have a tendency to want to hire and mentor and coach people who are like ourselves. And we don't need more people like us. What we need is people who bring diverse opinions, who complement our skills, who can maybe do some of the administrative tasks and allow me to focus on some of the more creative tasks, or people who are very good at human resource management, or people who can do the accounting skills. And so I think it takes a bit to realize that I should appreciate differences. Sometimes we tend not to care for people who have different opinions than we do, when in fact those are most frequently the most valuable friends that we could be making. I think that's one of the hardest challenges.
Well, like I couldn't agree with you more. I'll tell you, and sometimes people in faith-based organizations hear a statement like that and they think, no, we have a code of beliefs and we're not going to. I don't think I hear you talking about core beliefs or core values. It's more self-awareness to know where you're good and not. And man, I, when I was pastoring a big old church at 31 years old, the only thing I had going for me was I knew everything. I'm so much dumber than I was then, but I think I've got a little better handle on what works and what doesn't on my team to complement my shortcomings.
Yeah,
What advice?
by the way, you said something very important, which is I do believe every organization should have a set of values and principles that are common. And the only way you can trust somebody is knowing that they share your same goals. They share your same values and principles, but they have different skills for achieving those. And so if you understand, yes, we have this common objective, but you have this capability, I have this capability. If we combine those, we'll be better than either of us could be apart. It's common values with distinct skills, distinct areas of
That's
expertise.
so good. And where I have gotten caught up as a founder, and I hope I'm learning my lesson, is when I first bring on people, I just want to delegate tasks and not responsibility. And there's such a difference, and it draws such a different caliber of leader. And I think the one saving grace for me is when I started hiring people that really do run with the ball. That I'm finding myself interviewing more around our core values, even more than around competency in the business. Is that a fair? Am I just crazy to interview that way, or what would you say to a client who says that to you?
No, not at all. In fact, I think most of the great companies that I know, I'll use Amazon as an example, but Bosch, for example, also does this. They have a set of core values and principles that they use in the interview process, and they'll focus the entire interview on understanding whether you share those values or principles or not. So no, I think that's fair game. But what we're looking for is understanding that people will have different skills, different perspectives, having some people that understand the way you think, some people that understand the way the elderly folks like I think. That diversity of perspectives is important if you're going to appeal to a broad range of customers.
So if I'm starting out a business or a church or a thing, and we've got some agility, a lot of organizations right now have newfound agility because this accelerator called COVID has forced us to try things we've never tried before. And frankly, I think it's given permission to make errors, and it doesn't matter as much anymore. So how then, as we move into whatever the other phrase I hate, the new normal, whatever that is, um, how do we maintain, how do you scale agility? Like, I don't want to become a slave to the system, but I've got to scale. What have you learned in your study about companies that successfully scale agility?
Yeah, it's a great question. And first of all, I share your distaste for jargon. So you make me chuckle every time you talk about it, and I'll try to avoid using some of these words, which I myself don't care for. But I do think it's true that we live in a world today where there's an environment of almost constant crises, what some people call black swan events. Yes, we're focused on the pandemic right now, but that will pass and there will be something else. There will be terrorist events. There will be military conflicts. There will be all kinds of environmental crises or natural disasters that we have to deal with. And so this dealing with a sense of constant change makes every leader, I think, ask ourselves, how can we thrive in a world of accelerating and unpredictable change? That's what we have to do. We have to build a system that is capable of doing that naturally, of doing that continuously. Sadly, what we see is a lot of organizations, just as you said during this pandemic, are reinventing ways to be agile. And necessity being the mother of invention, we do find a way to cope with this temporarily. But then unfortunately, when the crisis passes, we go back to traditional ways of thinking until the next crisis hits, and then we have to reinvent it all over again. And the key is to build a system that is capable of continuous adaptation, just continuously. Just, it's a natural way of doing things. We're always trying, we're always experimenting, we're imagining future scenarios and asking ourselves, what if this happened? How would we deal with that? How could we change quickly? And then when it happens, we're not caught flat-footed because we've imagined that scenario. We've thought about what could happen and we're relatively prepared to deal with it. But it's building a system that enables people to change more regularly than just kind of haphazardly or occasionally bootstrapping when the unexpected hits.
Well, I am just a liberal arts major, religion major at a liberal arts school with a philosophy minor, which doesn't teach me much about business. So help me understand, is it crazy then to actually measure and financially reward people's performance in innovation? Like I've heard stories, I don't know how much truth there is, to 3M at some level of their company, 15% of every day was set aside for inventing new things. Like, is that something that you would recommend as a practice, some form of measuring and rewarding financially a team member's ability to innovate?
I would say yes, but with some caveats.
Well, yeah, we had some people who innovated with accounting. They were called Enron. So
Exactly. That's exactly right. And so you do want to have these controlled experiments. And one of the things that's been interesting in people that have studied innovation is they have learned that if you do too much with rewards to try to create innovation, you can actually stifle innovation. That
interesting.
is, yeah, that you can make people so eager to earn the reward that they become risk averse for fear of missing the reward. And so many times we find that in order to encourage innovation, it's not just about financial rewards. It's about trusting people. It's about giving them the freedom to try some things. It's about recognition. And when they do something well, letting them know. And when they try something that didn't work, letting them know that that's great too, because we learned something very important in this process. Thomas Edison talks about thousands of experiments in discovering the right filament for a light bulb. And he doesn't view the ones, or he didn't view the ones that didn't work as failures. He viewed them as learning what didn't work. So I am not fond of another trite phrase of fail fast, because I think any moron can fail fast and most morons do. So I don't think it's about failing fast. I just think it's about learning fast. And you try things and you learn and you adapt. All of us in our daily lives make mistakes. We have to face up to those mistakes when it doesn't work out. And if we don't, we're not going to repent. We're not going to be able to learn from those mistakes and grow. But if we do and we become stronger in the process, then we become better people and better teachers of others, I think.
That's really great. I'd love to hear some real time, without naming names or stories, but I was reading about your book on Amazon, because I guess we're recording on the 21st of May. It doesn't really even come out till next week. And having launched a book last month, I will pray for a good book release for you in the middle of all this mess.
Thank you. You're very kind.
I saw one of the people that endorsed the book is an executive at American Airlines, and I thought, now, isn't that kind of funny? Because what in the world, how much has their life changed? As you've dealt with clients through this pandemic, where have you seen some really cool moments of agility that we might learn from and apply going forward?
Oh, I've seen so many of them. For example, Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A is a great company, and you wouldn't think there was much room for innovation there. But when this crisis hit and they had to move to doing more takeout orders very quickly, they did. And they have such a relationship with their employees that the ideas were flowing fast and furiously. And they found within a week or two, 14 ways to improve their pickup, their takeout ordering, so that they could help more customers to get through the lines quickly and it could be done safely. I was talking to a chief executive officer just a couple of weeks ago of a major retailer who said, we used to make 5 decisions in a month. Now we make 5 decisions in a day. And I have to trust people. We reinforce the values and the principles, but we say after that, please go out and help us to figure out how we're going to serve our customers in this process and keep them safe. It's interesting that I do a lot of work in retail, and some of the retailers that will have the best long-term results have consciously sacrificed short-term profits for long-term benefits. They're taking care of their employees. They're investing in employee safety. They're actually restricting the number of customers that they serve to keep those customers safe. They're thinking of the communities. They're changing their manufacturing away from traditional products to personal safety equipment. And yeah, they're not going to make as much money doing that in the short term, but they've got their long-term objectives clear, front of mind, and they're building loyalty in their customers and their employees and their communities and even their shareholders that are going to benefit them for decades.
Well, it's interesting to see the organizations I see excel, and what we're trying to mirror is the ones who said, okay, nobody's going to get any business done during this mess. So what can we do to serve others in our client base? So we've done something good with our time, because I mean, at the end of the day, how we spend this time will be measured, and it does matter. But B, when this is all over, those who have served will be remembered. It won't go backwards. So, hey, let me ask you this. So we spend our day interviewing people. We interview around the values of our clients. But I would think some measure of agility is going to be necessary in every key hire, in every business going forward. So if you were going to teach me how to interview somebody to kind of run a caliper on their agility, what would be some points that you'd be looking for, or questions you might ask? And I know I'm catching you cold with that, but
no, that's fine actually. And I don't mean to be too cute about it, but one thing I will say is it takes one to know one. It's very helpful for somebody who has an agile mindset to interview somebody to figure out whether they have an agile mindset or not. So one thing I would be doing is looking for people to interview candidates that I think are pretty good at agility themselves. because this notion of we tend to like in other people what we see in ourselves, I will tell you that Agile people often scare the daylights out of bureaucrats. And so it is not unusual in an interview process for a number of them to get weeded out very quickly, because people will say, this guy's crazy, or this woman is talking about shaking up things in ways that scare the daylights out of me. So you really do need to have some people that are comfortable with innovation and creativity and agility, both talking to them, but when they come into the organization, mentoring them and coaching them. Because if you bring someone like that into a very bureaucratic organization and they feel estranged, they're not going to feel very comfortable. They're not going to have the opportunity to prove their capabilities. You know, one of the things that has surprised a lot of executives in this pandemic is that they thought in order to become more agile, they were going to have to create a whole new organizational structure, and they were going to have to bring in brand new people because they didn't have those kinds of people in the organization. Well, lo and behold, they're finding out that they didn't have to change the organization structure, and those latent skills were lying dormant inside people. They just never knew about it. But given the opportunity, they rise to the occasion. I think we see that all the time. Everyday people that just think of themselves as commoners, but in a test of courage, they rise to the occasion, and we discover skills that maybe even they never knew that they had.
That sounds like what we're seeing in our company. It also sounds like, so what you said now and just prior to now is absolute gold for some of our clients out there. Because whether you're a Christian university or a school or a church, chances are if you're looking for a head of the organization, you're going to have a search committee. And my experience has been that when an organization's in shift and they need a new leader, they find a search committee that can be stable. And it's almost like you're not going to have an agile person running any of the interviews if you go. So maybe one takeaway for our listeners today is if you're forming a search committee, make sure someone on there is agile, or someone's had to work through crisis, or whatever you want to call the moment that causes them to rise to the top. Super, super helpful. As you think forward to organizations focusing on agility, there's always the overcompensation. Well, let's look for agility everywhere. Are there job sectors within organizations that should have more agility or less agility? I mean, just like I mentioned accounting, in Houston, we're kind of allergic to innovative accounting now after Enron. So what sectors would you say, oh, more agility there and maybe not as much here?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you're absolutely right. And for example, I think anything that is going to need consistency, reliability, conformance to standard operating procedures, you don't really want agile teams shaking that up. I'll give you a silly example, but I'm a consultant and I fly a lot. And when I get onto a plane, I'm sort of comfortable knowing that that pilot has a checklist. There's something there, the mechanics are going to go through and check things. The pilot is going to go through and check things. I do not want to get onto a plane and have the pilot say, good news, we're going to try an agile takeoff today. Never done it before. Fasten your seat belts. Really hope this works. I want a by the book pilot that has done everything. And that's similar in accounting. That's similar in human resource policies. I don't want every individual department making up their own sexual harassment policies. I want to know that they're going to adhere to common procedures. And so anything where I want to minimize variability, I'm going to incorporate standard operating procedures for running the business reliably and efficiently. I will not use innovation, agile innovation on a daily basis there. Now, periodically, there may be parts where I look at it and say, we've always done drug safety checks this way. Maybe there's a better way to do it. I'm going to test it in a controlled environment. And then if that works, I'll change my standard operating procedures. But anytime I'm doing agile innovation, I'm purposely increasing variability of activities and outputs and results. I'm doing it in a very controlled environment so that if it doesn't work, I can stop it without harming people. But if it does work, then I can incorporate it as a new way of doing things. But I can't afford to have every activity in every organization just willy-nilly, day to day, deciding, I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to inject this drug into Darrell and see what happens. Could be funny. Who knows? There are procedures to follow for some of these things that I'm grateful for.
And what, by conversely, what would you say are the areas that you would say, yeah, no, here you really want to look for agility in these particular departments?
I think there are places like marketing, for example, where agility is perfectly formulated to succeed there. You're close to customers. You're going to try something with them. Does it resonate with them or does it not? The number of times that you've seen companies make scary faux pas in their marketing department that end up offending a large number of people. If they had tested that in a control group for a short period of time to see what kinds of effects they were, instead of just, oh, I love this, let's blow it out. That's where agile adaptation works effectively. It's great for new product development. It can be great for finding new ways to customize things for customers in restaurants, for example, giving them more options on the menu. Anything where customers like change. Fashion, for example. There's a misconception that people really don't like change, and we know that's wrong. People love change. They love to watch new movies. They love new songs. They love new clothing. If you follow the careers of any great comedians, one of the things that you will find is they love to do live stand-up comedy. Why? Because they test their new material on small groups with real-time feedback to see, does this joke work? Does this humor work? So any time where you're testing something that's a little risky, you want to control the experiment, get feedback, adjust it if it doesn't quite work. Perfect for agile innovation.
That's great. I was having lunch back when I was pastoring with a friend of mine, a doctor, and as we were sitting at lunch, he was arranging the silverware and he was lining them up just perfectly with the foot of the table, and I mean, like, took forever doing it. And I looked at him and I said, let's call him Richard. Richard, anyone ever talk to you about OCD? And he said, William, you want your neurosurgeon to be OCD. Fair enough. There are places where agility is not wanted. But let me just close with one little idea that a pastor told me many years ago. Pastors arguably one of the largest churches in the country. He said, William, you know what I've found I have to do? The job of the leader, and I want to hear your reaction to this. The job of the leader of any growing organization is to carefully inject chaos from time to time. And I don't know if that makes sense or not, but like to break the stability, to decalcify the organization, the leader is to, with great wisdom and restraint, inject chaos. How would you react to that? And I don't even know if you would say it applies to agility, but it sounds to me like it does.
I love the thought, and I agree that you have to be open to change. In businesses, one of the problems that we see is that leaders believe their responsibility is to predict and command and control. That is, my goal is to see the future perfectly and to tell people what they have to do to achieve that perfect goal, and then to watch them every step of the way and to make sure that they do that. I don't think that's true. I think the role of a leader is to test and to adapt and to coach, to unleash people. One of the lessons I learned as a father and a grandfather is that I was not raising children. I was raising future adults. And in a business, I'm not trying to get employees to do what I tell them to do. I'm trying to raise the next generation of leaders.
That's so
And
good.
so when my teenagers wanted to do things that seemed a little chaotic, seemed a little risky, I felt like my responsibility was not to just blindly trust them and say, well, if that's what you want to do, go ahead and do it. My responsibility was to make them trustworthy and therefore to gain increasing confidence that I've seen their ability, I've seen them prove their trustworthiness here. Now I know I can trust them to do this. They've been they've they've proven that they can handle one talent. I'll give them two talents. I'll give them five talents and watch what they can do with it. So I would say this openness to chaos, this openness to new ideas, and yet coaching people to help them succeed as they bring new ideas to you, and the humility of realizing I'm not perfect. I don't have perfect vision into what needs to happen. How can I bring others into the decision-making process, work with them, and as a team, develop a goal and a strategy and an approach for achieving it so that everybody feels good about it. People need to feel good about the contributions that they're making, not just like, yeah, I did what Darrell said to the letter. And if it doesn't work, it wasn't my fault. It's his fault for telling me to do that. We've got to help people. Our role as leaders is to help people grow and develop and become trustworthy.
That's so good, and such a good book. It had to be in a divine plan that it come out now. There's no way to have coordinated. But I work with. I've lived the world of the old established and of the startup. And when you're in the old established, it's like, man, I wish we could just do new things all the time. And when you're in the startup, you want to try and find systems. But this balance, if you're listening today, get a copy of Doing Agile Right. And of course, in the show notes today, we'll send out links to everything that you could ever want. And if you're listening and you need management consulting, call Bain. You won't regret it. Darrell, thanks for making time for us in a time that I know is very busy for you.
Such a pleasure to chat with you. I appreciate your questions, and it's an honor to be part of your program. So thank you.